بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه كما يحب ربنا ويرضاه. أما بعد. In this lesson, inshallah, we're going to continue from where we left off. Last lesson we covered qada as-siyam, repaying back missed fasts. And we said that if a person he misses a fast for no valid reason, or he breaks his fast during Ramadan for no valid reason, that this is a major sin. And what's upon the person to do is to repent to Allah, at-tawbah and al-istighfar, and seek forgiveness for this major sin which they have committed, and fulfill all the conditions of tawbah. And from the conditions that a person, he should make a firm resolve not to re-offend, not to commit this crime again. And this is all that's wajib. The correct opinion is that the person does not have to make up for that missed fast. He does not make up for that missed fast because there's no evidence. But if a person breaks their fast for a valid reason, they are not sinful, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed them to make up for this missed fast outside of Ramadan. So all that's wajib upon these people is to make up that missed fast. And the time frame given for making up missed fasts from Ramadan is from one Ramadan to the next. This is the time frame a person has to repay back missed fasts. طيب. From the issues that we did not mention, and the authors did not mention, is if a person dies and he owes an obligatory fast, whether that fast is a vow, nadhr, or kafara, expiatory fast, or fast from Ramadan. If a person owes an obligatory fast, be it one of these three, and he doesn't make them up, and he is overtaken by death, then the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith of Aisha, which is reported by Bukhari and Muslim, Man mata wa alayhi siyamun sama anhu waliyuhu. Whoever dies while he is owing some fasts, then his relative should fast on his behalf. And this, what I mentioned, is something which Shaykh bin Baz he mentioned in explanation of the hadith, that this hadith refers to obligatory fasts, the three types that we mentioned, and also applies to someone who has the ability to repay back the fast, but they are lazy and they delay it until they are overtaken by death. This is where this hadith applies. Their relative should fast, and it's recommended. This is not wajib. It's not wajib for the relatives to fast, but it's something recommended. And if someone else other than the relative fasts for them, then that's sufficient, as Shaykh bin Baz he mentioned. طيب. So man mata, whoever dies and he owes some fast, then his wali, his relative, should fast on his behalf. طيب. Today, inshallah, we're going to move on to the next issue. Al-mas'alatu al-thaniya. The second issue is as-siyamu al-mustahab, the recommended fast. In this chapter, the authors, they are going to speak about the different types of recommended fasts that a person should observe outside of Ramadan. So it's not just Ramadan where we observe fasting. There are also other fasts which a person should observe throughout the year. Only difference is that these other fasts are recommended. A person, he attains reward for doing so, but if he leaves them off, then he's not sinful. The authors say, من حكمة الله عز وجل ورحمته بعباده أن جعل لهم من التطوع ما يماثل الفرائض. From the divine wisdom of Allah Azza wa Jal and His mercy towards His servants is that He has enjoined and He has prescribed from the voluntary deeds من التطوع ما يماثل الفرائض, which resemble the obligatory acts. So just like we have obligatory prayers, we have voluntary prayers. And likewise, the wajib zakah, we have recommended or voluntary charity. Likewise, we have wajib hajj, which is wajib once in a lifetime. But if a person wants to add to that and do hajj voluntarily, there's also the voluntary hajj. And likewise with fasting, we have the wajib fast, which is fasting Ramadan, and then we have the voluntary fasts, which we're going to find out. And the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has enjoined voluntary acts which resemble the obligatory acts is وَذَلِكَ زِيَادَةً فِي الْأَجْرِ وَالثَّوَابِ لِلْعَامِلِينَ, and that is ziyadatan, to increase in ajr and thawab, in reward and recompense for its doers. Those who establish these voluntary acts or perform these voluntary acts, they are increasing and adding to their account of good. وَجَبْرًا لِلنَّقْصِ وَالْخَلَلِ, and it also compensates for any deficiency or shortcomings that occur within the obligatory acts. So if a person has some deficiencies in his wajib salah on the Day of Judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to say, look towards his voluntary prayers, and that is going to compensate for any deficiency and shortcomings. وَجَبْرًا لِلنَّقْصِ وَالْخَلَلِ, and to compensate for any deficiency or shortcomings, الَّذِي قَدْ يَطْرَعُ عَلَى الْفَرِيضَةِ, which may enter upon the obligatory act. Okay, so two reasons why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has enjoined the voluntary acts which resemble the obligatory acts. Firstly is to increase in ajr, and secondly to compensate for any shortcomings or deficiencies that may occur in the obligatory acts. فَقَدْ سَبَقَ مَعَنَا, it has preceded, or it's been mentioned previously, أَنَّ الْفَرَائِضَ تُكَمِّلُ مِنَ النَّوَافِلِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ, that أن الفرائض تكمل من النوافل يوم القيامة, that the obligatory acts are completed via the voluntary acts on the Day of Judgment. So on the Day of Judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to compensate and complete any deficiencies or shortcomings that have occurred within the obligatory acts by taking from the voluntary acts. So the voluntary acts are going to compensate any shortfalls that occur in the obligatory acts. وَالْأَيَّامُ الَّتِي يُسْتَحَبُّ صِيَامُهَا هِيَ, and the days which is recommended to fast are as follows. The authors are going to mention 8 in total, 8 recommended fasts. But generally speaking, so long as the fast is not one which is makruh or one which is haram, then it's generally mustahab for a person to fast. So the ones that are going to be mentioned here are the ones where the specific evidence, the muqayyad, recommended fasts. Okay? طيب. The first one which is mentioned here, صِيَامُ سِتَّةِ أَيَامٍ مِّن Shawwal, fasting 6 days from Shawwal. Fasting 6 days from Shawwal. Shawwal is the month after Ramadan. After Ramadan we have Shawwal. Where's the evidence for this? لحديث أبي أيوب الأنصاري رضي الله عنه, due to the hadith of Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, may Allah be pleased with him, قال, he said, سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول, I heard the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم saying, من صام رمضان ثم أتبعه ستا من شوال كان كصيام الدهر. Whoever fasts Ramadan then follows it up by fasting 6 days of Shawwal, كان كصيام الدهر, it's as though he's fasted dahr, an entire year. And this hadith is reported by Muslim. So it's recommended to fast 6 days from Shawwal, and it doesn't matter if it's at the beginning, in the middle, or at the end. So long as a person fasts 6 days of Shawwal, then he fulfills the sunnah. But the scholars, they recommend that a person, he does so straight after Ramadan. So obviously the first day of Shawwal is Eid. It's haram to fast on this day, as we're going to find out. So from the second day of Shawwal, you should begin fasting the 6 days of Shawwal. 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. Why is that? Because this is more closer to applying the statement of the Prophet ثُمَّ أَتْبَعَهُ, then he follows it up. From that we understand that following it up is doing it straight away, immediately, and also to do it consecutively. And also they recommend that a person, if he has any missed fasts from Ramadan, that he repays them first. You should make up for your missed fasts, then you should fast the 6 days of Ramadan. That's what the scholars recommend, because it says whoever fasts Ramadan. So if you've only fasted 25 days and you've missed 5 for a valid reason, and then you start fasting 6 days of Shawwal, you haven't really fasted Ramadan, have you? You've only fasted 25 days. So this is why they said you should make up your missed fast and then begin fasting. But obviously if you're going to have to make up the whole month, you've missed the whole month because you was traveling or whatever reason there is, then obviously you can't make up and then fast the 6 days together. It's not possible. So you have to do as much of Ramadan as you can and then fast 6 days, because fasting the 6 days of Shawwal can only be done within Shawwal, whereas repaying back missed fast for Ramadan can be done throughout the year until the start of next Ramadan. And this you can find in the explanation of Imam al-Nawawi of this hadith, in his explanation of this hadith of Muslim. So fasting 6 days of Shawwal, this is the first recommended fast. The second one, صيام يوم عرفة لغير الحاج, fasting the day of Arafah for the non-pilgrim. So this is something which is recommended for someone who is not performing Hajj. يوم عرفة, the day of Arafah, is the 9th of Dhul Hijjah. The 9th of Dhul Hijjah, which is the 12th month in the Islamic calendar. So we have Ramadan, then Shawwal, then Dhul Qa'dah, then Dhul Hijjah. 2 months after Ramadan, the month in which we perform Hajj. The 9th of this month, this is what is referred to as Arafah. And Arafah is one of the greatest pillars of Hajj. The standing on the plains of Arafah. This is one of the greatest pillar of Al-Hajj. So here they're saying that this is something which is recommended for everyone except the one who is performing Hajj. For the one who is performing Hajj, then it's not recommended for them to fast on this day. Okay, what's the evidence that it's recommended to fast this? لحديث أبي قتادة رضي الله عنه قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, due to the hadith of Abu Qatada that he said, who said, the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said, صيام يوم عرفة أحتسب على الله أن يكفر السنة التي قبله والسنة التي بعده. Fasting the day of Arafah, the 9th of Dhul Hijjah, the Prophet is saying, I hope from Allah that it expiates the sins of the previous year and that of the coming year. So it expiates 2 years worth of sins, fasting this day. And this is why there is consensus, as Al-Allama Al-Bassam, he mentions in Tawdih Al-Ahkam, his explanation of Umdat Al-Ahkam, he says that صوم يوم عرفة هذا هو أفضل صيام التطوع بإجماع العلماء. Fasting the 9th of Dhul Hijjah, يوم عرفة, this is the best type of voluntary fast by agreement of all of the scholars, because it expiates 2 years worth of sins. طيب. And this hadith is reported by Muslim. As for the pilgrim, so this is recommended for the non-pilgrim. As for the pilgrim, أما الحاج فلا يسن له صيام يوم عرفة. The Hajj, the pilgrim, is not sunnah for him to fast the day of Arafah. Why is it not sunnah? لأن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أفطر في ذلك اليوم والناس ينظرون إليه. Because the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, he broke his fast on that day while the people were looking at him. So he was performing Hajj and he did not fast on that day, to show to the people that the pilgrim should not fast on this day. And this hadith here is from the hadith of Maymuna radiallahu anhu, which was reported by Bukhari and Muslim, as Shaykh Abu Musa mentioned in his commentary. And also another reason, وَلِأَنَّهُ أَقْوَى لِلْحَاجِّ عَلى الْعِبَادَةِ وَالدُّعَاءِ فِي ذَلِكَ الْيَوْمِ. So on the day of Arafah, the pilgrims, they leave Mina from sunrise. From sunrise they head towards the plains of Arafah, and they stand there in dua and worship until sunset. So in order for them to be able to fulfill this act of worship to the best of their ability, standing and worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's better for them that they don't fast. لأنه أقوى للحج. So them breaking their fast, this is better for them in terms of strength to fulfill the acts of worship and to make dua on this day. في ذلك اليوم. طيب, that's the second reason which the authors have mentioned. So it's better because the Prophet ﷺ didn't do it, and it's better because it allows a person to fulfill the act of worship and the greatest pillar of the Hajj. And the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-Hajj Arafah. He said, Hajj is Arafah. Yani the essence and the core of Hajj is this act of worship that is done on this day, this pillar. So this is the second recommended fast. So this is only for the non-pilgrim. The third recommended fast is صيام يوم عاشوراء, fasting on the 10th. Ashurah comes from the word Ashurah, 10th. And what this refers to is the 10th of Muharram. The 10th of Muharram, which is the first month of the Islamic calendar. So fasting on the 10th of Muharram, this is the third recommended fast. Why is it recommended? Because فَقَدْ سُئِلَ النَّبِيُّ صلى الله عليه وسلم عن صوم عاشوراء. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم was asked about fasting Ashurah, the 10th of Muharram. فقال أحتسب على الله أن يكفر السنة التي قبله. I hope from Allah that it expiates the previous year's sin. Arafah expiates 2 years, Ashurah expiates 1 year. طيب, and this hadith is reported by Muslim. طيب. So it's recommended to fast on this day. And also something special about this day is that it's mentioned in the hadith of Ibn Abbas, which is reported by Bukhari and Muslim, that this day was the day in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved Musa alayhi salam and his people. And it's the same day in which he drowned Fir'aun and his people. So that great victory occurred on the 10th of Muharram. And this is why the Jews, they used to fast. When the Prophet ﷺ asked them, they mentioned that this is the reason. So he said, we are more deserving of Musa than you. And this is why he commanded the believers to fast. The Prophet ﷺ commanded the believers to fast. The first obligatory fast was Ashurah. And then this was abrogated by the obligation of Ramadan. When Ramadan became obligatory, Ashurah became mustahab. It was a recommended fast. As Aisha radiallahu anha, she said, فَلَمَّا فُرِضَ شَهْرُ رَمَضَانَ قال صلى الله عليه وسلم مَنْ شَاءَ صَامَهُ وَمَنْ شَاءَ تَرَكَهُ أي صوم يوم عاشوراء. The hadith, which is reported by Bukhari and Muslim, Aisha, she said, when Ramadan was made obligatory, the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever wishes to fast, then he can fast, and whoever wishes, he can leave it. Yani Ashura. ويستحب صيام يوم قبله أو يوم بعده. And it's recommended for a person to fast a day before it or a day after it. Yani alongside the 10th of Muharram, it's recommended to fast a day before it or a day after it. Shaykh Abu Musa, he mentions that the sunnah, what's come in the sunnah is to fast the 9th only. The Shaykh says, قُلْتُ الثَّابِتُ هُوَ صِيَامُ يَوْمٍ قَبْلَهُ. What's affirmed is fasting the day before the 9th of Muharram. أَمَّا بَعْدَهُ فَلَمْ يَثْبُتْ. As for fasting the day after, يعني the 11th, this is not something which is proven. لكن لا بأس بصيام يوم بعده لمن فاته التاسع ليحقق المخالفة لليهود. But it's okay for a person to fast the 11th so that he can make himself distinct from the Jews. طيب. So they're saying here, ويستحب صيام يوم قبله أو بعده. The correction that we just mentioned is that in terms of the hadith from the Prophet ﷺ, his encouragement was only to fast the 9th, not the 11th. However, if someone is going to fast the 11th because he missed the 9th, then that's okay. That's what Shaykh Abu Musa he mentioned. So what's the evidence for this? لقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم لئن بقيت إلى قابل لأصومن التاسع. The Prophet ﷺ said, if I live long enough until إلى قابل, until next year, لأصومن التاسع, I would surely fast the 9th. Yani the 9th alongside the 10th. And this hadith is reported by Muslim. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ did not live until the next year, but his statement still stands. وَلِقَوْلِهِ صلى الله عليه وسلم, and due to his saying صلى الله عليه وسلم, صوموا يوما قبله أو يوما بعده خالف اليهود. Fast the day before it, yani the 10th, or a day after it, be different to the Jews. This hadith is not authentic. Number 5, أخرجه أحمد وابن خزيمة وفي سنده ضعف. In this hadith there is weakness. لكنه صح عن ابن عباس بنحوه موقوفا من قوله. But it's authentic from Ibn Abbas موقوفا, يعني a statement of Ibn Abbas رضي الله عنه, not ascribed to the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, a statement of Ibn Abbas that he said this. What's correct is that Ibn Abbas did not say this. The actual hadith which is ascribed to Ibn Abbas is reported by Ahmad, hadith number 2154, as Shaykh Abu Musa he mentions. But the hadith is weak because in the chain of narration we have a man by the name of Muhammad ibn Abd al-Rahman ibn Abi Layla, who is a weak narrator. And also there is another man, and he is also weak, and that other man is Dawud ibn Ali, who is also weak. So there's 2 weak reporters in this chain of narration. So the statement of Ibn Abbas that he said fast the day before it and fast the day after it, this is not authentic. In fact, what's correct is that Ibn Abbas said صوموا التاسع والعاشر, fast the 9th and the 10th, وخالفوا اليهود, and be different to the Jews. This is what's proven to be from the statement of Ibn Abbas, that you should fast the 9th and the 10th. So there's no evidence, authentic evidence from the Prophet ﷺ that a person should fast a day after Ashurah, the day after Ashurah. But as Shaykh Abu Musa mentioned, that if a person misses the 9th, because that's where you're supposed to be fasting, 9 and 10. If you miss 9, then you can fast 11, just so that you are distinguished from the Jews who only fast the 10th. طيب, so this is number 3. Number 4, صوم الاثنين والخميس, fasting on Monday and Thursday من كل أسبوع, of every week. So throughout the year you could fast Monday and Thursday. This is something which is recommended. The evidence for this لحديث عائشة رضي الله عنها, due to the hadith of Aisha رضي الله عنها, كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يتحرى صيام الاثنين والخميس. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, he was keen in observing the fast of Monday and Thursday, which is reported by Ahmad al-Tirmidhi, and Tirmidhi said it's Hasan Sahih, and Shaykh Albani also authenticated it in his commentary on Ibn Khuzaymah. So the hadith is authentic, that the Prophet ﷺ was keen to fast on these 2 days. وَلِقَوْلِهِ صلى الله عليه وسلم, and likewise the Prophet ﷺ said, تُعْرَضُ الْأَعْمَالُ يَوْمَ الْإِثْنَيْنِ وَالْخَمِيسِ. The deeds are presented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on Mondays and Thursdays. فَأُحِبُّ أَن يُعْرَضَ عَمَلِي وَأَنَا صَائِمٌ. And I love that my deeds are presented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala while I am fasting. Reported by At-Tirmidhi, An-Nasai, Abu Dawud, and Hassanahu Tirmidhi. Tirmidhi said it's Hasan, and Shaykh Albani said it is authentic, Sahih, in Sahih Tirmidhi. So the hadith is authentic. And likewise, when he was asked about fasting Monday, specifically in the hadith of Abi Qatada, which is reported by Muslim, he said, ذَاكَ يَوْمٌ وُلِدْتُ فِيهِ, that is the day in which I was born. وَيَوْمٌ بُعِثْتُ فِيهِ أَوْ أُنزِلَ عَلَيَّ فِيهِ, and that is the day where I was sent as a prophet. أَوْ أُنزِلَ عَلَيَّ فِيهِ, or received revelation. So the excellence of fasting Monday is greater because of the added virtue which is mentioned in this hadith of Abu Qatada. So this is number 4, fasting Mondays and Thursdays. Number 5, صيام ثلاثة أيام من كل شهر, fasting 3 days from every month. لقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم, because the Prophet ﷺ said to Abdullah ibn Amr, this Sahabi, he said to him, صم من الشهر ثلاثة أيام, fast from every month 3 days. فإن الحسنة بعشر أمثالها, because the reward for a deed is 10 times. وَذَلِكَ مِثْلُ صِيَامِ الدَّهْرِ, and that is equivalent to fasting an entire year. So this is a second case where a person, he fasts some voluntary fast, and it's multiplied to an extent where it's as though he's fasted the whole year. We saw that here with the 6 days of Shawwal. So 6 days of Shawwal alongside fasting Ramadan is equivalent to 1 year. How is that? That is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says that deeds are multiplied 10 times. مَنْ جَاءَ بِالْحَسَنَةِ فَلَهُ عَشْرُ أَمْثَالِهَا. Whoever comes with a good deed, then he will have 10 times its like. So Imam An-Nawawi, he said that 1 month times 10 is 10 months. And 6 days times 10 is 60 days, which is like 2 months. So 10 months and 2 months equals 1 year. And likewise here, if you fast 3 days from every month, so we have 3 times 12 is 36, and then 36 times 10 is 360, which is equivalent to a whole year. طيب, and this hadith where the Prophet recommended to Abdullah ibn Amr to do this is reported by Bukhari. This hadith is reported by Bukhari. Another evidence showing that you should fast 3 days from every month is the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. قال, he said, أوصاني خليلي صلى الله عليه وسلم بثلاث. My dear friend, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he advised me with 3 things. صيام ثلاثة أيام من كل شهر, to fast 3 days from every month. وَرَكَعَتَيِ الضُّحَى, and to pray 2 rak'ah for duha. Duha is a voluntary prayer which is offered after sunrise. After sunrise, when the sun, it rises above the ground or the horizon, the length of a spear. So around, they mention around 15 to 20 minutes after sunrise. You offer 2 rak'ahs, and you can offer more than that, 2 in 2s, 2 units, as much as you want. So he advised him to fast 3 days from every month, to offer at least 2 rak'ahs of Salatul Duha, وَأَنْ أُوتِرَ قَبْلَ أَنْ أَنَامَ, and that I should perform witr before going to sleep. And this hadith is reported by Bukhari. Hadith is reported by Bukhari. So here we have the recommendation of fasting 3 days, and this is something which the Prophet ﷺ advised Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu with. وَيُسْتَحَبُّ أَن تَكُونَ الْأَيَّامَ الْبِيضِ. And it's recommended that these 3 days that a person is going to fast, that he does so on the white days. So you are allowed to fast any day of the month, but it's better to fast on these specific days, which are known as the white days. وهي الثالث عشر والرابع عشر والخامس عشر. And these white days, they are the 13th, 14th and 15th of every month. And the reason why they're called white days is because that's when the moon is at its fullest and brightest. The evidence for this, that you should do it on these 3 days particularly, is the hadith of Abi Dharr radiallahu anhu. قال, he said, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من كان منكم صائما من الشهر فليصوم الثلاث البيض. If one of you is going to fast during a month, then let him fast the 3 white days. The 3 white days. Reported by Ahmad and Nasa'i, and this is the wording of Ahmad, and it's been graded Hasan by Shaykh Albani, Sahih Sunan An-Nasa'i, in Sahih Sunan Nasa'i. Okay, so that's number 5. Number 6, the 6th recommended fast is صوم يوم وإفطار يوم, to fast a day and to break the fast the next day. So one day fasting, the next day not fasting, and so on continuously. لقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم, due to his saying, أفضل الصيام صيام داود عليه السلام كان يصوم يوما ويفطر يوما. The best fast is the fasting of Dawud عليه السلام, the Prophet. He used to fast one day and he used to break his fast the next. This hadith is reported by Bukhari. So this is something which is highly recommended. If a person is able to do this, fasting one day and breaking the fast the next. وَهَذَا مِنْ أَفْضَلِ أَنْوَاعِ التَّطَوُّعِ. And this is from the best of the voluntary fasting. This is from the best type of voluntary fasts. The 7th one, صيام شهر الله المحرم, fasting the month of Allah al-Muharram. The first month of the Islamic calendar is known as al-Muharram. Fasting during this month is something which is recommended. Yani increasing in fasting during this month generally is something which is recommended. Because لحديث أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه, due to the hadith of Abu Hurairah رضي الله عنه, قال, he said, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said, أفضل الصيام بعد رمضان شهر الله المحرم. The best fast after Ramadan is fast on the month of Muharram. وأفضل الصلاة بعد الفريضة صلاة الليل. And the best type of prayer after the obligatory prayers is the night prayer. And this hadith is reported by Muslim, showing to us that fasting during the month of Muharram is something which is virtuous. 8th recommended type of fast is صيام تسع ذي الحجة, fasting 9 days from the month of Dhul Hijjah. So the month of Dhul Hijjah is the same month in which we fast Arafah, the 9th of Dhul Hijjah. So what they're saying is to fast from the 1st till the 9th. So fasting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, including Arafah, which is on the 9th. This is number 8. وتبدأ من أول يوم من شهر ذي الحجة, and it begins from the first day of the month of Dhul Hijjah, which is the last month of the Islamic calendar, the month in which a person performs Hajj. وتنتهي باليوم التاسع, and you stop. So it begins from the 1st and it ends on the 9th. وهو يوم عرفة, and that is the day of Arafah, as we mentioned. وذلك لعموم الحديث الواردة من فضل العمل فيها, and that is due to the generality or which is found in the hadith encouraging to do good deeds during these days. The first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah are blessed days, because the Prophet ﷺ said, ما من أيام العمل الصالح فيهن أحب إلى الله من هذه العشر. There is no days in which deeds are more beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than during these 10 days, the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. And this hadith is reported by Bukhari. Hadith reported by Bukhari. So the general encouragement to do good deeds during these 10 days is evidence showing that a person should fast. Why? Because وَالصَّوْمُ مِنَ الْعَمَلِ صَالِحِ, fasting is generally a good deed. So this is something general. It's not something specific, in contrast to the other evidences were mentioned. So this is not really something which is a specific evidence, but this is something which is general, found in this encouragement that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves deeds that are done within these 10 days more than He loves them being done outside of these 10 days. هذه العشر, 10 days. But the 10th is Eid al-Adha, and it's haram to fast on the 10th. So that's why we just fast 9 days, the first 9 days, not 10. Even though Allah loves these that are done within the full 10. طيب. So here now, alhamdulillah, we have covered 8 recommended fasts. But the authors, they've left off one more, and this is what the Shaykh, he adds. He says, ذكر المؤلف 8 أنواع من صوم التطوع. The authors have mentioned 8 types of voluntary fasts. وفاته ذكر التاسع. And he's missed off the mentioning the 9th. So there's another one from the voluntary fast which they have not mentioned. وهو الإكثار من الصيام في شعبان. And that is to increase in fasting in the month of Sha'ban. Sha'ban is the month prior to Ramadan. This is also something which is recommended. And this is proven by the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha قالت, she said, كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يصوم حتى نقول قد صام. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم would fast continuously until we'd say, the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, he's definitely fasting. Some versions, until we'd say that he's not going to stop fasting. حتى لا يفطر. نقول لا يفطر. He's not going to stop fasting. ويفطر, and sometimes he would stop fasting حتى نقول قد أفطر, until we would say that he's definitely broken his fast. In some riwayat it mentions حتى نقول لا يصوم, until we'd say that he's not going to fast. And this is the point of Shahid. She said the 9th recommended fast is to increase in fasting during the month of Sha'ban, which is the month just before Ramadan. So we've mentioned 9 recommended fasts that a person should observe throughout the year outside of Ramadan. And this is something which I advise myself and everyone who's watching this to implement. Barakallahu feekum. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.